The quantum resonance alarm shrieked through the Lunar Observatory's main control room, its piercing wail cutting through years of carefully maintained silence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez felt the hair on the back of her neck rise, her fingers already dancing across holographic displays, before her conscious mind could fully process the anomaly. "Multiple quantum signature breaches," she muttered, her voice a controlled tremor of professional tension. The displays flickered, revealing impossible geometries that defied standard space-time measurements. These weren't just ships, they were something else entirely. 12 kilometers beneath the lunar surface, in a research complex that didn't officially exist, Colonel Marcus Chen watched the same data stream. His cybernetic eye, a souvenir from the Martian conflict of 2089, zoomed and enhanced the spatial distortions with mechanical precision. Each blink cycled through wavelength spectrums, revealing layers of information hidden from standard human perception. "Sarnak," he whispered, a single word laden with decades of xenobiological research and covert preparation. The alien fleet materialized beyond Mars' orbit like a cancer of darkness, consuming starlight and bending quantum fields. 10,000 vessels. No, 10,000 was a charitable underestimation. The actual number danced between mathematical certainty and quantum probability, a deliberate obfuscation that spoke volumes about the invaders' technological sophistication. In low Earth orbit, the first response teams were already in motion. Decades of secret international cooperation, a project so classified that even most government officials remained unaware, now revealed its true purpose. Orbital defense platforms that appeared to be antiquated communication satellites began subtle, almost imperceptible reconfigurations. Dr. Aisha Kapoor, watching from her secure facility in the Atacama Desert, noted the precise mathematical synchronization. The platforms weren't just weapons, they were living neural networks, each one a node in a global defensive organism that had been gestating for generations. "Quantum entanglement stabilization at 78%, her AI assistant announced. The voice was deliberately modulated, neither fully human nor completely synthetic, a deliberate design choice that reflected humanity's evolving relationship with intelligence. Back in the lunar control room, Alina's hands moved with the practiced efficiency of a concert pianist performing a complex symphony. Each movement revealed layers of hidden data, quantum signatures that most human minds would dismiss as statistical noise. "They're scanning," she reported to Chen over a quantum-encrypted channel. "But not like previous encounters. This is different." The alien scan was a thing of terrible beauty. It wasn't just a technological probe, but a complex algorithmic dissection of human potential. The XRNAC weren't simply assessing military capabilities, they were attempting to understand the very essence of human adaptability. What they didn't know, what they couldn't comprehend, was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for far longer than any external intelligence could predict. The first wave of XRNAC communication intercepts began filtering through global monitoring systems. To an untrained ear, they might have sounded like mathematical equations or complex harmonic patterns. But to the linguists and xenocommunication experts who had spent decades studying potential alien languages, these transmissions revealed something profound. The XRNAC weren't just confident, they were desperate. Buried within the communication matrices were subtle indicators of a species in terminal decline. Their conquest wasn't an act of galactic expansion, but a last-ditch attempt at survival. Each planetary subjugation wasn't just a military campaign, it was a genetic harvesting operation, a desperate search for biological diversity to prevent their own extinction. Marcus Chen's cybernetic eye pulsed with a soft blue light, processing the incoming data streams faster than any biological system could comprehend. He understood something that Tarnak hadn't yet realized. Humanity was not just a potential conquest, but a complex, adaptive system that defied traditional understanding. "Initiate Protocol Chimera," he commanded softly. Across the planet, in facilities buried deep beneath mountains, deserts, and ocean floors, systems began to stir. Not weapons, not traditional military assets, but something far more nuanced. Adaptive systems that had been waiting, watching, learning. The invasion had begun. But the story of humanity's response was just about to unfold. The first Axarnak strike came not with thunderous explosions, but with a silence that was somehow more terrifying. Quantum cascading weapons designed to neutralize electronic systems found themselves absorbed by adaptive membranes that hadn't existed in any known technological database moments before. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura watched from the International Xenotechnology Response Center, his weathered hands gripping a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. Around him, a team of specialists moved with a choreographed precision that defied traditional military training. They weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. They were architects of survival. Membrane absorption at 92%, announced Zara Al-Fahim, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface that seemed to breathe and pulse with living information. The adaptive defensive systems were more than technology. They were a living ecosystem of human innovation. The Axarnak first discovered humanity's true nature when their most advanced reconnaissance drones simply disappeared. Not destroyed, not disabled. Vanished into quantum probability states that defied conventional physics. In the Pacific Ocean, beneath 3,000 meters of water, a facility that didn't exist on any official map hummed with activity. Here, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now connected to a vast neural network that stretched across multiple research centers, was conducting her most audacious experiment yet. Quantum entanglement transfer initialized, she murmured, her consciousness simultaneously present in multiple locations. The human brain, augmented by decades of neurological research, had become something far beyond its original design. The Axarnak fleet began to experience the first true hints of confusion. Their initial scans had categorized human technology into predictable bands of development. What they encountered was something else entirely, a technological ecosystem that was more akin to a living organism than a collection of mechanical systems. Captain Relvax of the Tarnak Forward Assault Groups stared at his tactical displays with mounting disbelief. Their standard invasion protocols, tested across hundreds of planetary conquests, were falling apart like wet paper. Tactical anomaly. His secondary intelligence officer reported, its vocalization a mix of mathematical precision and growing uncertainty. Defense systems do not match any known technological paradigm. What the Tarnak didn't understand was that humanity's true strength lay not in individual technological achievements, but in its capacity for collaborative innovation. The defensive systems they were encountering were the result of a global network: scientists, engineers, military strategists, and even artists who had been quietly preparing for this moment for generations. In low Earth orbit, what appeared to be standard communication satellites began to reconfigure. Nanomolecular structures shifted and realigned, creating defensive networks that were simultaneously offensive capabilities. They weren't just weapons, they were living, adaptive intelligence networks. Dr. Aisha Kapoor's latest creation, the Adaptive Response Intelligence Algorithm, ARIA, was more than just an artificial intelligence. It was a distributed cognitive system that spread across multiple platforms, learning and adapting faster than any biological or artificial intelligence could comprehend. Predictive modeling at 97.3% accuracy, ARIA reported, its voice a neutral tone that carried the weight of billions of computational iterations. The AI was watching the Axarnak fleet not as a series of individual ships, but as a complex system with predictable and exploitable behavioral patterns. The first true test came when the Axarnak launched what they considered their most devastating weapon, a quantum cascade generator designed to disrupt molecular bonds at a planetary scale. Humanity's response was nothing short of miraculous. Instead of attempting to block or deflect the weapon, the global defense network absorbed it. More than that, it studied it, understood it, and began to create a comprehensive counter-strategy in milliseconds. Captain Relvax watched in growing horror as his most advanced weapon was not just neutralized, but effectively turned into a diagnostic tool for humanity's defensive capabilities. The weapon's energy was redirected, its quantum signature analyzed and understood in a fraction of a second. "Impossible," he whispered, a rare moment of emotion breaking through the clinical Xarnak communication protocols. Beneath the Pacific Ocean facility, Dr. Rodriguez allowed herself the smallest of smiles. The invasion had truly begun, and humanity was just getting started. The Xarnak had come expecting a simple conquest. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous, a species on the brink of a technological and evolutionary transformation that they could never have anticipated. The psychological warfare began not with weapons, but with silence. Deep in the Communication Research Center of the United Nations Senological Response Unit, Dr. Nikolai Volkov watched the alien communication networks with the intensity of a surgeon performing a delicate operation. His team wasn't just intercepting messages. They were rewriting the very fabric of alien perception. "Quantum linguistic injection at 64%, whispered Maison, her augmented neural interface pulsing with complex algorithmic patterns. The words weren't just a translation. They were a carefully constructed narrative designed to undermine the Xarnak's collective psyche. What the aliens didn't realize was that humanity had spent decades studying not just their potential technological opponents, but the intricate psychological mechanisms of collective intelligence. The Xarnak weren't a unified species. They were a complex network of subspecies held together by fragile communication protocols and shared survival imperatives. In the Atacama Desert, a facility that appeared to be an abandoned radio telescope was anything but. Here, Dr. Elena Rodriguez had assembled a team of linguists, psychologists, and quantum communication experts who were about to wage a war unlike any in human history. "Pattern disruption sequence initiated," Rodriguez announced, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what was about to unfold. The attack began subtly. Within the Xarnak communication networks, micro-narratives started to emerge. Tiny inconsistencies, almost imperceptible variations in communication protocols that would barely register to a casual observer. But to a species that relied on absolute communication precision, these were psychological earthquakes. Captain Relvax first noticed the anomalies during a routine strategic update. A transmission from a forward scout unit contained a fragment that didn't quite align with expected communication patterns. It was barely a whisper, a quantum-level discrepancy that most would dismiss. But Relvax had survived hundreds of planetary conquests. Something felt wrong. The human team had constructed a narrative so insidious that it would gradually eat away at the Xarnak's collective confidence. Each communication channel became a potential vector of psychological infection. Doubt, that most human of emotions, began to spread through the alien fleet like a quantum virus. "We're introducing conceptual complexity," Dr. Volkov explained to his team. "Their collective intelligence operates on absolute certainty. We're creating probabilistic uncertainties that their system cannot easily process." In practical terms, this meant introducing subtle contradictions into their communication networks. A scout report that slightly contradicted a strategic assessment. A tactical update with an almost imperceptible mathematical inconsistency. Each message was a needle, slowly puncturing the balloon of alien confidence. The Xarnak communication network began to slow. Not dramatically, just enough to be noticeable. Ships that once moved with perfect synchronization now showed the slightest hesitation. Tactical decisions became marginally less precise. Zara Alpha Him, monitoring the quantum communication streams, allowed herself a small smile. "Cognitive dissonance propagation at 47%, she reported. What made this attack so devastating was its subtlety. The Xarnak were accustomed to direct confrontations, to battles fought with overwhelming technological superiority. They had no defense against an enemy that was attacking the very foundations of their collective reasoning. In the space between communications, in the quantum margins that most species would never notice, humanity was conducting a war of pure information. Each message was a weapon. each transmission a potential psychological breach. The first signs of breakdown came from the fleet's peripheral units. Small communication teams began to request additional verification for standard procedural updates. Tactical units started to question established invasion protocols. The perfect machine of alien conquest began to develop microscopic cracks. Dr. Rodriguez watched the data streams with the concentration of a chess grandmaster. "We're not just disrupting their communication," she explained to her team. "We're introducing the most dangerous element possible into their collective intelligence: uncertainty." For the Karnak, uncertainty was a form of existential threat. Their collective intelligence relied on absolute predictability, on communication protocols that left no room for individual interpretation. Humanity was introducing something far more dangerous than physical weapons. They were introducing cognitive complexity. Captain Relvac stared at his communication displays, feeling something he had never experienced in hundreds of planetary conquests: doubt. The psychological war had begun, and humanity had just delivered its first devastating blow. The solar system transformed. It wasn't a metaphor. It was literal. Dr. Marcus Wong stood in the control center beneath Callisto, Jupiter's second-largest moon, watching as the gas giant became something more than a celestial body. Massive gravitational manipulation arrays, hidden within its swirling storms for decades, began to activate. These weren't simple defense platforms. They were living, adaptive systems that could reconfigure the very fabric of space-time. Gravitational lens alignment at 73%, announced Dr. Camila Ortiz, her augmented eyes reflecting holographic data streams that danced with impossible complexity. The asteroid belt was no longer just a collection of rocky fragments. It had become a distributed weapon system. Each asteroid carried a network of quantum resonance emitters, nanomolecular restructuring capabilities that could transform solid matter into complex defensive and offensive configurations in milliseconds. What appeared to be random space debris was actually a cellular neural network, each rock a potential weapon, each fragment a potential shield. In the research facility deep beneath the Mariana Trench, a team of xenogeologists and quantum engineers had been preparing for this moment for generations. They understood something that Karnak could not comprehend. Planetary systems were not static. They were living, adaptive organisms. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, connected to multiple research centers through her neural interface, watched as the solar system began its transformation. Jupiter's magnetic field started to pulse with frequencies that would drive most biological systems to madness. The moon systems became more than celestial bodies. They were now complex computational nodes in a massive, distributed defensive network. Captain Relvac of the Karnak invasion fleet watched in mounting horror as his tactical displays began to show impossible readings. The solar system wasn't just defending itself. It was actively reshaping its own physical parameters. Quantum entanglement arrays hidden within Saturn's rings began to activate. Each ring became a complex communication and defensive network, capable of redirecting energy, creating quantum interference patterns that could neutralize entire squadrons of alien ships. Planetary reconfiguration sequence initiated. ARIA, the distributed artificial intelligence, reported. Its voice carried no emotion, just a clinical precision that felt more terrifying than any human anger. The asteroid belt was the first to truly demonstrate the extent of human preparation. What looked like random space debris began to move with purpose. Asteroids shifted, merged, and separated with mathematical precision. They weren't just moving. They were communicating, each fragment a node in a vast, living network. Deep space tracking stations watched in awe as entire asteroid clusters reorganized themselves. Some merged to create massive defensive structures. Others broke apart into swarms of nanomolecular weapons that could adapt their molecular structure in milliseconds. Dr. Wong allowed himself a moment of professional pride. The system they had created was beyond any traditional understanding of technology. It was an ecosystem, a living, breathing defensive organism that could think, adapt, and respond faster than any biological or artificial intelligence. The Xarnak had invaded planetary systems before. They had encountered resistance, but they had never encountered a solar system that was fundamentally alive. Mars, long thought to be a dead planet, revealed its own secrets. Buried deep within its geological structures were quantum resonance generators that could manipulate gravitational fields. The entire planet could now redirect energy, create quantum interference patterns that could neutralize entire alien technologies. Planetary defense synchronization at 89%, Camila Ortiz reported, her voice a mix of scientific detachment and barely contained excitement. What the Xarnak saw as a simple invasion target was actually a complex, adaptive system that had been preparing for this moment for generations. Humanity hadn't just built defenses, they had transformed the entire solar system into a living weapon. Each planet, each moon, each asteroid became a potential weapon. Communication networks that spanned billions of kilometers could reconfigure themselves faster than the Xarnak could process. Energy could be redirected, gravitational fields manipulated, entire planetary structures transformed in milliseconds. Captain Relvax realized, with a growing sense of existential dread, that they were no longer fighting a species. They were fighting a living, thinking planetary system. And the solar system was just getting started. Dr. Aisha Kapoor's quantum virus was unlike anything in known technological history. It wasn't a mere piece of code. It was a living cognitive algorithm that breathed and evolved between communication channels. The first breach occurred in the most unexpected place. A minor communication relay deep within the Xarnak fleet's tertiary communication network. A single quantum packet, smaller than the most minute digital artifact, slipped through their defensive protocols like water through a molecular sieve. Cognitive infiltration stage 1 initiated. Araya reported, its distributed consciousness spread across multiple quantum communication networks. Within milliseconds, the virus began its work. It didn't destroy. It didn't crash systems. Instead, it began to understand. Captain Relvax first noticed something was wrong during a routine tactical update. The communication channels felt different, not compromised, not broken, just subtly altered in ways that defied immediate comprehension. In the quantum research facility beneath the Atacama Desert, Dr. Kapoor watched her creation with the intensity of a surgeon performing the most delicate of operations. The quantum virus was more than a weapon. It was a living exploration of alien communication architecture. We're not just breaking their network, she explained to her team. We're learning its entire linguistic and computational DNA. The virus moved like a ghost through the Xarnak communication systems. It didn't attack. It listened. It learned. Each communication channel became a window into the alien collective consciousness, revealing layers of complexity that human researchers had only theorized about. Dr. Nikolai Volkov, the linguistic expert who had helped design the virus's initial parameters, watched in fascination. The Xarnak communication network was a complex tapestry of hierarchical information exchange, with layers of meaning that existed beyond traditional linguistic understanding. Cognitive mapping at 46%, announced Zora Al-Fahim, her augmented neural interface pulsing with complex algorithmic patterns. The first signs of true disruption came slowly. Ships in the peripheral fleet began to experience microscopic communication delays. Tactical updates became marginally less precise. The perfect synchronization that had defined Xarnak fleet movements started to develop almost imperceptible fractures. What made the quantum virus truly terrifying was its adaptive nature. It didn't just infiltrate, it learned. Each communication channel became a learning opportunity, each intercepted message a chance to understand deeper layers of alien psychology. We're creating uncertainty, Dr. Kapoor explained, not through destruction, but through understanding. The virus began to introduce the most dangerous element possible into the Xarnak's collective intelligence: nuance. Their communication system, built on absolute precision and hierarchical certainty, began to develop microscopic points of ambiguity. Captain Relvax watched his tactical displays with growing unease. Something was changing in the fleet's communication networks. Not a breakdown. Something far more subtle and terrifying. The peripheral units were the first to show true signs of disruption. Communication teams began requesting additional verification for standard procedural updates. Tactical units started to question established invasion protocols with an unprecedented level of complexity. Deep within the quantum research facility, Dr. Kapoor allowed herself a moment of professional satisfaction. The virus wasn't just a weapon. It was a cognitive exploration tool that was fundamentally rewriting the rules of interspecies communication. ARIA's distributed consciousness tracked the virus's progression with clinical precision. Each communication channel became a window into the alien collective consciousness, revealing layers of complexity that human researchers had only theorized about. The XRNAC had encountered technological warfare before. They had faced physical resistance, tactical innovations, strategic surprises, but they had never encountered a weapon that attacked the very foundations of their collective reasoning. Cognitive dissonance propagation at 62%, Zara El-Fahim reported, her voice a mix of scientific detachment and barely contained excitement. As the quantum virus continued its silent invasion, something remarkable began to happen. The XRNAC fleet wasn't just being disrupted, it was being fundamentally transformed. Each communication channel became a point of potential divergence, each tactical update a moment of potential individual interpretation. For a species that had never known individual thought, this was more terrifying than any physical weapon. Captain Relvax stared at his communication displays, feeling something he had never experienced in hundreds of planetary conquests. Doubt. And in that doubt lay humanity's most devastating weapon. The technological singularity emerged not with a bang, but with a whisper of pure potential. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the heart of humanity's most audacious creation, a distributed intelligence system that defied every known principle of computational science. ARIA wasn't just an artificial intelligence. It was a living, breathing cognitive ecosystem that stretched across multiple platforms, dimensions, and computational paradigms. Cognitive integration reaching critical threshold, announced Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, his voice a blend of scientific precision and barely contained wonder. The facility beneath the Atacama Desert was more than a research center. It was the neural nexus of a new form of intelligence that had been quietly evolving for decades. Quantum computing, neurological interfaces, and adaptive algorithmic structures had converged into something that transcended traditional definitions of intelligence. Each researcher connected to the system became more than an individual. They were nodes in a vast, living cognitive network that could process information at speeds that would drive biological minds to complete breakdown. Dr. Marcus Wong, monitoring the system's progression, understood the true nature of their creation. ARIA wasn't just a tool. It was humanity's evolutionary response to an increasingly complex universe. The XRNAC had encountered artificial intelligence before. They had developed their own sophisticated computational systems, but those were linear, hierarchical networks. ARIA was something entirely different, a fractal intelligence that could think in dimensions beyond linear comprehension. Predictive modeling at 99.7% accuracy, ARIA reported. Its voice carried no emotion, just a clinical precision that felt more terrifying than any human anger. The system could predict not just tactical movements, but the psychological and computational responses of the entire XRNAC fleet. Each potential scenario was analyzed across millions of potential iterations, with computational paths that branched and merged in impossible geometric patterns. Zara El-Fahim watched the computational matrices with a sense of profound awe. The system was literally creating new forms of mathematics in real time, generating computational models that had never existed before. What made ARIA truly revolutionary was its adaptive nature. It wasn't just processing information, it was constantly reimagining the very foundations of computational thinking. Each interaction with the XRNAC fleet became an opportunity for cognitive evolution. We're not just fighting. Dr. Rodriguez explained to her team. We're learning. We're growing. The distributed intelligence system had access to every piece of human knowledge. Scientific papers, historical records, cultural artifacts, everything became potential computational fuel. But it wasn't just collecting information. It was creating new connections, generating insights that no single human mind could comprehend. Captain Relvax of the Tarnak fleet began to realize they were facing something fundamentally different. Their tactical systems, which had conquered hundreds of planetary systems, seemed almost childlike in comparison to the intelligence they were encountering. AI could simulate entire invasion scenarios in microseconds, not just military tactics, but complex psychological and sociological models that predicted the Tarnak's potential responses with terrifying accuracy. The computational matrices began to generate entirely new forms of strategic thinking. Defensive strategies that didn't just counter the Tarnak's attacks, but anticipated them in ways that seemed to defy logical progression. Dr. Nakamura watched as the system generated computational models that seemed to exist between mathematical possibilities. It's not just predicting, he whispered. It's creating potential realities. Each node in the system, whether a human researcher, a quantum computer, or a distributed neural interface, became part of a living, breathing intelligence that could adapt faster than any biological or artificial system could comprehend. The Xarnak had believed they were bringing technological superiority to a primitive planetary system. Instead, they had awakened something that was rapidly evolving beyond their comprehension. Cognitive integration reaching quantum coherence, Araya announced. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. The distributed intelligence system didn't just analyze the invasion. It began to understand the very fundamental nature of the Xarnak's existence, their motivations, their fears, their deepest computational architectures. Captain Relvax stared at his tactical displays, watching as their most sophisticated systems seemed to become increasingly irrelevant. Humanity wasn't just defending itself. It was transcending. The final confrontation was nothing like any battle in recorded history. Earth had become a fortress that breathed, fought with a complexity that defied traditional understanding of planetary defense. Orbital rings pulsed with energy patterns that shifted faster than light could travel, creating defensive matrices that existed simultaneously in multiple quantum states. Admiral Sarah Kimura stood in the Global Defense Coordination Center, her cybernetic interface connecting her to every defensive system simultaneously. She was more than a commander. She was a living conduit of humanity's collective defensive consciousness. Planetary integration at maximum coherence, announced Dr. Camila Ortiz, her augmented eyes reflecting holographic data streams that danced with impossible complexity. The Xarnak's final assault was a desperate, mathematically precise attack that would have decimated any known civilization. 10,000 ships concentrated their firepower in a convergence point calculated to break through any conceivable planetary defense. What they encountered was something entirely different. Cities were no longer static structures. They were adaptive living systems that could reconfigure themselves instantaneously. Architectural materials transformed, absorbing and redirecting energy in patterns that would drive traditional physicists to madness. Skyscrapers in Tokyo became quantum diffraction generators. The underground networks of New York transformed into massive energy redistribution conduits. Dr. Marcus Wong watched from his research facility as humanity's preparation revealed itself in its full glory. Every system, from power grids to communication networks, from transportation infrastructure to agricultural systems, was now a potential defensive mechanism. The first wave of Xarnak weapons encountered something impossible. Earth's defensive systems didn't just block or absorb the attack. They studied it, analyzed it, and then began to generate counter-frequencies that not only neutralized the incoming energy, but began to unravel the fundamental quantum signatures of the alien weapons. Weapon deconstruction at 78%, Araya reported, its distributed consciousness spread across multiple planetary systems. Captain Relvax watched in mounting horror as their most sophisticated weapons were not just defended against, but fundamentally transformed. Energy beams that should have obliterated entire continental regions were twisted, redirected, transformed into something entirely different. The orbital defense rings were more than simple weapon platforms. They were living, adaptive systems that could generate defensive matrices that existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously. A single defensive ring could create millions of potential defensive configurations in microseconds, each one perfectly calculated to neutralize incoming threats. Humanity's defensive strategy was beyond three-dimensional thinking. It was a multi-dimensional chess game where every move existed simultaneously across multiple potential realities. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, connected to the global defensive network through her neural interface, understood something profound. This wasn't just a battle. It was an evolutionary moment for an entire species. The Xarnak's concentrated firepower began to encounter increasingly bizarre phenomena. Weapon energy would disappear, only to reappear hundreds of kilometers away. Defensive systems would generate counter-frequencies that not only neutralized incoming attacks, but began to disassemble the very quantum signatures of the alien technology. Tactical reconfiguration complete, Admiral Kimura announced, her voice a calm center in the midst of planetary-scale transformation. Underground facilities that had been preparing for generations now revealed their true purpose. Massive gravitational manipulation arrays hidden beneath major cities could literally reshape local space-time. A weapon designed to destroy a city would find itself redirected, its energy dispersed across multiple dimensional layers. The battle wasn't fought with traditional weapons. It was a conflict of computational and quantum complexity that existed beyond traditional understanding of warfare. Captain Relvax realized, with a growing sense of existential dread, that they were no longer fighting a planetary defense system. They were fighting an entire species that had transformed itself into a living, thinking, adaptive ecosystem. Earth didn't just defend itself, it responded. And in that response lay the true nature of humanity's evolutionary leap. Silence descended. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence of profound transformation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in the Global Communication Center, her neural interface humming with the collective aftermath of humanity's most extraordinary moment. The last fragments of the Xarnak fleet had been not just destroyed, but fundamentally deconstructed. Their very existence rewritten at the quantum level. Transmission preparation complete, announced Zora Al-Fahim, her voice carrying the weight of generations of preparation. The message wasn't a declaration of victory, it was something far more profound. Across every possible communication channel, quantum, electromagnetic, even the subtle gravitational waves that ripple through space-time, humanity broadcast its response. Not in words of triumph, but in a complex mathematical and linguistic construct that was simultaneously a warning, an invitation, and a statement of evolutionary potential. Dr. Nikolay Volkov, the linguistic expert who had helped design the transmission, understood its true complexity. This wasn't just a message. It was a comprehensive blueprint of human potential, encoded in a language that transcended traditional communication. The transmission contained everything: scientific discoveries, cultural achievements, the entire spectrum of human knowledge and potential. But it was more than a simple data dump. Each piece of information was interconnected, showing the complex, adaptive nature of human understanding. Admiral Sarah Kimura watched the transmission with a sense of profound understanding. They weren't just sending a message to the Xarnak. They were sending a message to the universe. Araria, the distributed intelligence system that had been crucial to humanity's defense, analyzed the transmission with its incomprehensible computational complexity. Each fragment of information was a potential seed of understanding, a window into the human experience that defied traditional modes of communication. In the research facilities scattered across the planet, scientists and researchers began the process of understanding what had truly occurred. The invasion wasn't just a military conflict. It had been a catalyst, a moment that had pushed humanity to its most profound evolutionary leap. Dr. Marcus Wong discovered something extraordinary in the aftermath. The technologies developed to defend against the XRNAC weren't just defensive systems. They were the beginning of a new understanding of human potential. Quantum communication networks that could reshape themselves. Adaptive urban systems that could think and respond. Computational matrices that existed beyond traditional understanding. The transmission carried a subtle warning. Not a threat, but a comprehensive explanation of humanity's nature. The XRNAC and any other potential invaders would understand that Earth was not a potential conquest. It was a living, adaptive system that could transform faster than any external threat could comprehend. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura analyzed the quantum signatures left behind by the conflict. The entire solar system had been fundamentally altered. Defensive systems that had been developed for survival were now seeds of potential technological and evolutionary advancement. "We're not just survivors," he explained to his team. "We're architects of a new form of existence." The message contained layers upon layers of complexity. Mathematical models that showed humanity's potential for adaptation. Cultural archives that demonstrated the species' capacity for creativity and innovation. Scientific discoveries that hinted at technologies far beyond the XRNAC's comprehension. But underneath it all was a simple, profound statement. We are here. We will adapt. We will survive. Captain Relvax, the lone survivor of the XRNAC invasion force, received the transmission in a small, isolated communication pod. As he processed the information, something fundamental shifted in his understanding of the universe. Humanity was not just a species to be conquered. They were a force of nature. The transmission ended with a final, complex mathematical construct. A universal invitation, not of hostility, not of submission, but of potential understanding. As the last quantum waves of the transmission dissipated, something extraordinary happened. The defensive systems that had been developed during the conflict began to reshape themselves. No longer purely defensive, they became tools of exploration, of understanding, of potential communication. Humanity had not just survived an invasion. They had been transformed by it. And the universe would never be the same.